Chairman Skewis. This is Sylvia.
Hello, this is Miguel Huerta. Can you hear me?
Hi, Chairman Huerta. Chair Huerta. Sorry, Chairman. Let's see. Yes.
No, I'm just a member. Isn't Mr. Skewis going to be with us tonight?
Mr. Skewis is with us. I see that he's having both phone and web problems, it appears, but he does have a quorum.
Okay,
And,
so
I can hear you guys. Can you hear
Okay,
me?
perfect.
we can hear you. So you are the chair tonight.
That's fine, but I don't have the audio, the visual. I've got. Let's see. Well, they wanted me to dial in, and I dialed in, and now I don't have the video. I'm going to launch Go to Training again. Open this session already running.
Yes.
You can only have one session running at a time. Close that. Wow. Okay, Sylvia, I'm going to close everything down and then try again.
Okay.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Well, I still have my audio. I see
Yes.
people. Okay, I've got video and audio now.
Perfect. Your commission is present and accounted for.
Okay. I've got 6:03 on my computer. We'll start the meeting, call the meeting to order. And are there citizen public comments to be heard this evening?
Yes.
Do you have a list, or are they supposed to raise their hand?
They're supposed to raise their hand on the app. For those folks who called in and do not have the ability to raise your hand, if you would announce your name. I have a Mr. Horacio Gasquet.
I think I found the hand to raise, so I've done that electronically. I'm doing it physically now too.
Did you have a public comment?
Are we already at that phase?
Yes.
Okay. The main comment that I have about the property in question at 4800 Stearns is that the traffic situation needs to be addressed in a unique way. Aaron has been very collaborative and very communicative, and we like working with him. But we still haven't seen something that addresses our concerns and doesn't open up new concerns. Also, what we've seen are not official site plans, and so we're really just kind of in a brainstorming phase. We don't really see the solution yet presented. There's just a lot of questions about how this interacts with the neighboring property at 4412, and how all this is going to play out. We've kicked around many proposals, but we don't really have anything concrete for a solution to the elephant in the room, which is the traffic and safety issues. I will yield with my remaining time to Terry.
Oh, sorry, I was talking, I was muted. Mr. Levy had his hand up next, but Mr. Levy, you are self-muted.
I can wait until all public comment is done. I just didn't see on here any it wasn't on the agenda for me to speak, so I just want to make that clear. That's all. I can wait.
Okay, Mr. Wheelis, you are self-muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I am opposed to the development. One question for all of the City of Sunset Valley stewards to ask themselves is this development in keeping with the city's comprehensive plan? Article 1, Section 101 of the City of Sunset Valley's comprehensive plan indicates it was established to protect and preserve the area's natural resources and to promote the health, safety, and general welfare of the community. Its inception was intended to reflect the desire that Sunset Valley continues to be a pleasant and relaxing community where yards are wide, people are few, and roadways are narrow. By providing orderly development, undue concentration of population, maintaining the environmental balance, and the integrity of the area. The city is approximately 1 square mile. So please ask yourself, is this development worth sacrificing a percentage of that 1 square mile? Does it reflect the city's desire to keep yards wide and people few? Will it make the traffic congestion on 290 better or worse? Any responsible steward of the city should not answer these questions in the affirmative. So I ask that you please do what's right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wheelis. Ms. Delaney, J.C. Delaney.
Yes, thank you. I mostly want to echo the comments of my friends and my neighbors, but as a longtime resident of this neighborhood, I've lived in this neighborhood for almost 20 years, first as a renter, and for the last 15 years, I've owned a house in this neighborhood. And this proposed development would completely change the character of this neighborhood. It would bring traffic and safety problems that would change this neighborhood forever. This would no longer be a safe place for our children to play, for our children to bike. The cut-through traffic that this development would bring would completely ruin this neighborhood. I agree with the prior speaker that this would create a corridor of commercial development that is completely non-congruent with the city's plan. And I don't think that sacrificing that amount of property to it would destroy the neighborhood. And I think that that's something that any of my neighbors want. I'm also highly concerned by the fact that we haven't even seen the comprehensive plan. There has been none that has been presented, and the one time it's been requested, it hasn't been given. We don't even know exactly what we're dealing with yet, and I believe that any approval by the zoning board to go forward with recommending this to the full council tonight is woefully premature.
Mr. Levy.
I believe Jean Wilkins is waving her hand.
Yeah, I'll wait till all the neighbors and public comment is done.
Okay, Ms. Wilkins.
Thank you. I oppose rezoning at 4800 and 4812. My reasoning for 4800, we talked a lot about moving the entrance to the property, the curb cut further west to make it safer. There was a letter dated June 12th from Scott Cunningham. It's based on a falsehood. That letter states that there's a negotiated joint curb cut with the property at 4812. That would be good. It would alleviate the concern about the safety with the exit ramp, swerving cars into traffic, more vehicles exiting from Stearns, people from Stearns trying to merge with that, and then having to watch so that they don't rear end cars, slow down or stop going into the property. However, it's not true. There is no negotiated curb cut with 4812. I mean, it's very, very clear that Miss Angeli plans to reside at that point, and now nothing is going to change. Of course, I respect her decision, but I would like to point out that then Sunset Valley is going to have an extra curb when 4812 is developed. The traffic study addresses pass-by traffic, the study done by Cody Stone. It does not deal with the traffic concerns neighbors have brought up, that I was talking about, the swerving, the merging, the rear-ending of people slowing down trying to get into the property. Also, I found it interesting that this study was completed in April during the COVID shutdown. So how in the world could it be accurate? The precedent of using a residential road for commercial use should not be set. Stearns is 19 feet wide, no sidewalks, drainage. It's much like Pillow Road. We have a safety fire concern using only two roads to exit the neighborhood in case of a wildfire. I don't think we can bear the burden of 15,000 square foot, 50 additional cars, 3-story building. I don't think as a neighborhood we should be asked to do that. The property should not be considered for rezoning, since at this moment, at this time, 4812 next door is still a single family residence. The site plan for 4800 does not include the required 100-foot setback. A geotechnical study should be requested to see if blasting into limestone will be needed to set pylons and move earth for the ground floor for a pad. If blasting is necessary, what will the environmental impact be? Rezoning this property does not meet Sunset Valley land ordinance requirements and should be denied. That's 4800. Are we doing 4812 now too, or is that later?
Yes,
That we're doing that now?
yes.
Okay. Property at 4812 Highway 290 is seeking a rezoning change to advance the rezoning of the adjacent development at 4800. There are criteria that must be met for approval of rezoning. The applicant has not provided numerous articles required under Sunset Valley Land Ordinance Code. I therefore oppose rezoning the property at 4812. Since volume and page of record, preliminary site plans, site building plan, contour map, and geological survey report on the environment, proposed map drawn proportionally to existing zoning maps, analysis proving information on an acreage dwelling units and building intensity, and most importantly, a traffic impact study have not been provided in the application. The traffic impact of two driveways that are so close together should be studied. If this zoning is approved, there will be another grandfather curb on 290 West. The precedent of speculative zoning should not be set, allowing the other developers to get around the Sunset Valley land ordinance. It's a beautiful parcel of land. It needs to be protected. There's a feature in the front that kind of fills up with water. It might be a sinkhole. That should be studied. It has been stated in the memo and meetings that the longtime resident will remain in her home. That means the rights to mitigation of noise, light, odor required by 4800 to build out will no longer be required. Promises can be made that this will occur, but she loses all of her rights. And if the property is sold, is flipped, the next person who owns isn't bound by any of this. For these reasons, I oppose rezoning 4812. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Weber, you are self-muted.
Okay.
There you go. Nope, you self-muted yourself again.
Okay. Let's see.
There you go. There you go.
It's doing it on its own. Hello? Okay. It's a glitch in this first time using. Anyway, thanks guys for letting me talk. I just want to disclose for the record that I am an attorney. I do work for the state of Texas, but I'm not here representing the state of Texas. I am myself a resident of Barton View, and my husband, who could not be here but is supporting me, Thomas Gonzalez, is also a resident of Barton View, and we live at 3215 Nancy Gale. We also oppose the zoning here. I don't want to regurgitate what Gene Wilkins just so eloquently said about the reasons for why the zoning is not congruent with current city ordinances, but I will echo the fact that we have ordinances here. We have criteria. The criteria hasn't been met. It's really that simple. And the zoning commission, I would just really urge you to look at the criteria. You have 10, and just ask yourselves, does it apply or does it not? And if you haven't met the criteria, then you shouldn't approve. It's really that simple. I also have a question about the standing of the applicant, because my read on the ordinance is that it has to be an owner of the property, and I'm not clear how Mr. Levy is considered an owner of the property here, so perhaps like down the line we can maybe address that. I also would like to say that I think this approval into a commercial setup for this neighborhood, these 2 plots of land, would destroy the quality of the neighborhood and set up a dangerous precedent, not only for all the traffic, but also the potential that other plots of land could easily be turned commercial based on this arbitrary process that's happening right now. And so for those reasons, I respectfully oppose this zoning. Thank you.
Mr. Cowan, your microphone is muted.
All right, thank you. Appreciate the time. I'm going to just touch some points. One, Aaron Levy, it's been good working with him, and the best guy we've dealt with so far in the last 10, 12 years that we've been dealing with rezoning issues. Most of the objections to the development are really related to traffic safety, and in particular, placing traffic, exiting the traffic from 4800 onto Stearns Lane. Stearns is a residential street, really unimproved, no curbing, etc. 19 feet across, like Pillar Road, people were talking about. There is a problem at that intersection of Stearns and 290 West Access Road. Chief told me like there've been 8 incidents in the last 2 years there. I think Aaron and the neighborhood association both agree that something needs to be done with the traffic conditions that are being caused by the ramp that TxDOT put where it's located. And again, the traffic studies were done during the coronavirus. I think the traffic flow estimates that TxDOT used are out of date and may have also not happened during peak times. That we also have a concern in regard to how the process 4800 and 4012 are listed separately on the agenda. They are being there's been an indication that this is a concurrent review, but the agenda for this meeting does not say concurrent review. It looks at these properties separately. It looks at the one at 4800 first. From our discussions and at least 3 meetings with Aaron, we understand that 4800, the really nice building plan he has there, isn't viable next to a single family zoning because of the setbacks that would be required. However, he's going to be next to single family zoning, but when this is being deliberated, because 4812 isn't going to be deliberated until after this recommendation's made on 4800. So we think that's a problematic. For the sites, we have had difficulty getting information in regard to what was submitted on 4812. As of now, we haven't received it. We think that one plan won't work for both sites because the sites are actually the geography of them are different. One has a sink place, looks like it might be a sinkhole. The other one's higher, the other piece of property is higher. One is going in for zoning for neighborhood commercial. The other one, the 4812, is going for into zoning, rezoning for neighborhood. 4800 is neighborhood office. 4812 is neighborhood commercial. It's different rezoning. These properties need to be deliberated on differently, and they need to have specific information related to each one, and there's nothing there on 4812. So we think that we need to straighten that out to go forward. There's also been the introduction of this concept of speculative zoning into this process, and it's not a part of Sunset Valley Code. We've had 2 attorneys look at this, and a state law pertaining to speculative zoning does not override the municipal zoning code regulations and processes. We think this speculative zoning argument is bogus and illegal. I appreciate your consideration. We also appreciate the Zoning Commission delaying the meeting to July 1 so we could attempt to get in more information. Again, we did not get the information on 4812 that we requested, and we look forward to the Zoning Commission taking care of this process so that it's fair and equal and follows the rules. Thank you.
Any more public comments? Helen Bessie, your microphone is muted.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sylvia. Okay, I admit I don't know a whole lot about this. I'm speaking from old time things, but old time knowledge, and that's not really relevant here. Although I think when the zoning first happened for the highway area, I mean, we require that all development comes in a single family residential, and then you can change it to something else. And I don't think anyone in the city ever thought that those 2 lots were single family residential right on a major highway. So I can see the applicant wanting to change them to something else and putting in something that's more appropriate for that lot. However, there was some talk a long time ago about, it never happened, about the city purchasing, I guess it's 4800, the one on the corner of Stearns, so that it could be left a entryway into the residential neighborhood, and that never happened. Also, that lot was covered with beautiful giant, or not giant, very, very large oak trees, and the owner, and I don't know who the owner was at that time, came in and cut them all down as we were promulgating a tree ordinance, or perhaps he did it afterwards. Again, my memory is very fuzzy on this. There's a lot of history with that lot. That's just background that's probably not relevant at all. I am concerned, I have the same concerns that Terry has about what is speculative zoning, and should the city be getting into something that's not even in our codes, and it's seems to be a way of getting around our own ordinances, which were approved by the residents of Sunset Valley and not by some administration. And also the other thing that, again, I don't have a lot of information, but Terry's saying that neighborhood has not gotten the support information that they had requested. And so it does seem to me that until the city can get that information to them, that I know you don't want to keep postponing the public hearing, but until they get that information, it doesn't seem appropriate, right, fair to continue with the zoning application until they have that information in front of them. This is their neighborhood, it's our city, and I think we deserve that. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Okay, Mr. Levy? Your microphone is muted.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Commission. Thank you, staff. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. I believe we were here to just discuss the one tabled item, but I'm happy to walk through as much of the presentation that everyone would like to see, because based on the comments that I've taken notes on, it seems like there's a lot of ill-informed neighbors and people that are neglecting the information that's been provided to date. There is constantly been the concern, which I agree with, from the get-go around traffic safety. The driver in the traffic safety has been this exit ramp in proximity to Stearns Lane. The result of TxDOT's study and the TIA provided in the memorandum, and just to be clear, although there's a date of April on it, that doesn't mean that's the day that April is when the study was done. The study was done over months prior. Their practice of how they do their study, I can't speak to because I'm not a traffic engineer. However, I can say that, as you will read in the memorandum and comment from TxDOT, the impact is minimal on our development proposal, and as a result does not trigger a full TIA. And what they use is based on traffic analysis. They gather data from their resources. I can't speak more to that. I don't want to. There's comment from neighbors about non-congruency with city plan. We've shown how this is part of the original FLUM for zoning, for commercial zoning. We've made a request to reduce the impact of its zoning to neighborhood office from neighborhood commercial, which is proposed. As far as the quote-unquote falsehood of a joint use access on Miss Angeli's property, I can provide all the legal documents that we've been negotiating. This has been a long conversation. It is accurate. It is the truth. I am not deceiving anybody. I've had thorough meetings and conversations and email exchange with this neighborhood for months. Those of the neighbors that have not been queued in or are uninformed by the information provided, I apologize if you did not receive it. I've made the best effort I can to make myself as transparent and clear to all of the community. I have provided to the community a concept of what 4812 would look like based on zoning regulation and scaling due to what we're able to do with the concepts designs that we have been doing on 4800. Clearly, there's a point where there's trying to put the cart before the horse, where all you can do is concept design. At a certain point, site plan development through detail of geotechnical study and civil engineering does not come until zoning is complete. We wouldn't be doing a comprehensive, detailed site plan. However, the conceptual plan is the plan that we would be moving forward on. There's also been talk here how this would impact the neighborhood. And I've shown in my study to both commission, the city, and the neighbors how there is a natural line between commercial and residential. Everything that we've proposed is well within that natural line. There will be no impact to Stearns Lane as far as the road is concerned. City of Austin agrees that this is a Sunset Valley development, that a curb is welcome to be cut there with a type 2 permit driveway, and that we would set up mitigation to enforce a right turn only to exit the property. It's been stated by neighbors themselves that there are actually 2 access points into this community. So if there was that much of a concern around exiting due to a minimizing impact of a small office building, they could always choose to exit a separate exit of the neighborhood. Trees removed on the property, obviously, I have no recollection of that, and I agree. I'm actually a sustainable designer and builder. Should there have been trees on the property, those would have been taken into account. Unfortunately, that's just not the case here. Also, I just want to make it clear that it seems that I'm getting 2 conversations. I have a conversation with the community. They show their support around my efforts and my transparency and everything I've done to address everything they've said. I see people shaking their head, but I don't recall you on any meetings. And it just seems that I get told one thing and we come to commission now, and it's a very different reaction. So as a result, I have shared with commission and staff all the email communication for the sake of transparency, as I have done with the neighbors as well. I've been sharing my email communications with TxDOT, with my traffic engineer, with my engineering staff. I really don't know what more to say. I've made a very thorough presentation previously, and I'm happy to revisit that for anyone who feels they need to kind of be refreshed or updated. So I'll leave that to you, commission and staff. Should you want me to share my screen, I do have everything available, including the memorandum, the TxDOT letter, a comprehensive study of the entire concept design and development, and the site plan concepts. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Do we have any other public comments? Mr. Burton.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. I wanted to thank everyone for their input, and I think if I was to kind of think about the summary of the feedback, it does sound like the neighborhood is very concerned about the concept of the traffic and the curb cut. I know that you're saying that you followed the proper procedures and all. I think we're just saying we're still concerned about that as a feature. We'd like to kind of continue that conversation. And yeah, I do think that, I definitely appreciate the fact that you're working with us. I'm a little bit late to the conversation, so I appreciate hearing all these things, and I'm kind of catching up. My main concerns are the traffic. I'll explain one type of situation. Previously, when we had shopping holiday seasons in the world, sometimes you can kind of sit in the neighborhood and be blocked all the way back up to Dudmar when you're just trying to leave the neighborhood. So from a resident's perspective, I know my wife and I literally plan our days around that because we cannot go to the store on those days. You're backed up for like almost an hour just trying to take the turnaround at Brody. So that was kind of where the concerns are probably coming from, those types of situations. I think one concept is like at 5 p.m., would cars come out of the garage, kind of like, you might think, and then line up at Stearns and then immediately say, oh, I'm going to go the other way, cut across the neighborhood drive, and then leave the other exit. Those are kind of scenarios we're thinking about. I just wanted to share.
Thank you. Ms. Burkhart. Ms. Burkhart, your hand is raised, but I believe you've already had your public comment, correct? Ms. Burkhart, your microphone is muted. Commissioner, there are no additional public comments other than folks who've already spoken.
All right.
Oh, Mr. Lowcock is raising his hand. He's the owner of 4812.
Hi, good evening. One thing that's been brought up is that there may be a sinkhole in the front part. That was never held water until Highway 290 was built up and all the water diverted off of the freeway into Mother's front lawn. It's also flooded the house several times through the years. My grandfather moved into that house, built it, I believe, in the late 1950s. So I've been going there ever since. I was just a small child all the way through. Mother and I moved into the house 1973, I believe. There's actually an article written in the Austin American-Statesman showing me floating on an inner tube in the garage shortly after Highway 290 flooded the whole property. Coming back with that, so there is no sinkhole. It's just poor design and water diversion from the freeway. So if that's a concern, I don't believe that you can find that there's a sinkhole coming through there. We do support Mr. Levy's proposition and proposal, coming back with it. So he's working, as I said last time in the meeting, I believe, 2 months ago or so, that he's shown very nice designs and concerns for mother's privacy and working within there. We were asking, I thought, and Aaron can address this probably more clearly, that we were both going toward commercial office, I believe, and I can be corrected with that as well. Nobody's contacted me for any supporting documentation, which if I needed to do something, I needed to be asked for it, going through with it. And I don't know if Aaron was working on that, going with it. We do have a working proposal on a shared drive. We're working out the negotiations on that to see what we both are satisfied and comfortable with doing. So we are trying to move forward in that regards. I'm not sure what the other comments, but those are some of the ones that probably I can address more than anyone else. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, that concludes public comments.
All right, moving on to item 3, slight diversion here is to consider approval of the minutes from the May 27th meeting. Do I have all members within hearing distance?
So moved. This is Bob Reitz.
I move for approval. Do I have a second?
Brent Boozer, I'll second it.
Okay.
Brent, thank you.
I will call roll. Chairman,
Roll.
I'll call roll for acceptance of the minutes. Mr. Skewis?
Yes.
Mr. Huerta? Mr. Huerta, you are self-muted.
Sorry about that. Aye.
Mr. Frick?
Aye.
Mr. Boozer?
Aye.
Mr. Reitz?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is 4800, from single family to neighborhood office.
Yes. Thank you. I believe that we left this off last time because we had determined that all conditions had been met except for item 8, I believe, which was confirmation from a licensed engineer that the cuts and the going through the entrance on 290 frontage road and the exit onto Stearns was within the bounds of propriety. So is that not the only thing that was missing from the last meeting? I would ask my fellow commissioners.
That is, this is Miguel Huerta. That is Chairman Skewis. There has been an issue raised regarding standing, and I think we should address that so that the public knows. but in the background material we were sent, and which is available online to the public, the world can look at it. The application is included, and there's a section that says if you're not the applicant, if you're not the owner, you need to get somebody's permission. And Rob Buchanan's signature is on the application at that point, very clearly saying that Mr. Levy has the authority to submit this on his behalf. And if I remember correctly, I've seen, I saw Rob Buchanan at one of these meetings in the past where he could have said something had it not been correct. So I think we have a definite standing. That's not a problem in this case. We do have an authorized agent moving forward.
And Commissioner Huerta, just for information on standing on the other case, Mr. Locox is Ms. Angelique's power of attorney on this matter and other matters.
Right, and I was going to get to that one when we called up 4812.
Oh,
but I don't think standing is an issue in either case. That's been resolved. So there we are.
The other issue that was raised was the issue of 10 points, and that's also included in the background information, Mr. Huerta. So thank you for pointing the background information out.
Okay. Now there was other things that were raised along the way, but I'd like to point out that a site plan, as opposed to a conceptual site plan, and those are two different things. One is governed by Appendix A to the LDC. The other is governed by Appendix B to the LDC. The conceptual site plan is included with 4812, and it meets the requirements of Appendix A. And again, this is online. It was part of the background material. The site plan, the more specific plan that's required by Appendix B, is not required unless somebody, a landowner, requests it, somebody that's within 500 feet, and or a council member or a zoning commission member. Zoning did not request it. Council has not had the opportunity to request it. So this is a question for staff and legal. Have any of the landowners within 500 feet of the property? It can't be just anybody. It's got to be somebody within 500 feet. Asked for a specific site plan.
We have not received any such request.
Okay, so then there's no requirement for that to be filed along with the geological survey or anything else. In fact, the traffic study is not required, but for the fact that we asked for it because we'd asked similar applicants in the past. There is a concern about the traffic study. But Mr. Levy explained that the traffic study was prepared in April, but it was done on data collected over several months. Is your engineer available to discuss that, or is he not available right now? Is he on the call?
So I believe I informed staff, he can be available as of 7 p.m. He's on his vacation right now. He's like, the soonest I can get on would be 7. So
yeah,
if we want to wait 17 minutes.
Well, you know, here's the thing. Having looked at this and other traffic studies, I suspect that that's what you said makes sense. And other traffic studies always collect data over a period of time, not a specific day. So
and I can't speak to, but there are certain thresholds that require different measures of analysis. Yes. Of what you guys are familiar with. So
and one of the things that we did is we made sure that you'll recall that the issue last time was the fact that it was an unstamped report that didn't have a final recommendation. I required that. We're not going to try to second guess a traffic engineer as the zoning commission. Anybody that's opposing this or the city or anybody else, this has been on notice since February 26th. There's been over 4 months. You could have found a traffic engineer to say otherwise. But what's before the commission today is a traffic engineering study that says that this is safe, stamped by an engineer, which means that he's putting his license on it. We have no reason to disregard that. So that's where I'm leaning in that direction, Chairman. I'm gonna stop and listen to what the rest of my zoning commissioners have to say on it.
Okay, thank you, Miguel. Anybody else want to weigh in on this? I mean, the way we left it at the last meeting when we tabled it, postponed it till now, is that was what we were waiting on, and the applicant has supplied that. Anybody else? Sylvia, the agenda item on my screen, I can't scroll down to see what the the one that Matt did for item 4. I assume that the staff recommendation is for approval on that.
Correct.
All right. Are we going to? So we're just deliberating and considering the change. We're not voting on anything tonight.
Yes, you need to call for the vote, and the vote is to consider from single family to neighborhood office.
Okay.
Right.
Is there anybody on?
This is Miguel,
Okay.
and that is a deviation from the master plan, the comprehensive plan, the future land use map, or FLUM, as some people call it, which calls for neighborhood commercial. This is actually one tier below neighborhood office. And as I understand it, Sylvia, this would be a recommendation to the council. The council then has, their review and takes it up again, and they can either accept, reject, or send it back to us. But we're just making a recommendation. We're not making the final cut.
Correct.
All right. Thank you, Miguel, for that clarification on a neighborhood office being one step below what they could have asked for. Anybody else have a comment?
I do. It's John.
Okay, John.
I guess we're talking about this memorandum that's stamped by Cody Stone, right? Dated June 15th. And in that is this table 1 trip generation, which I think is what the neighbors seem to be concerned about, is when were these numbers? Is this an average of traffic from one time period to another? Or how did they get this in a 24-hour period, 244 total? So that's within a 24-hour period, but how many days and times of months were these totals that they came up with to get to this average of 244? And so if it happened during the pandemic period, then I think the neighbors do have something to stand on here, because I can't tell from this. Yeah, sure, it's stamped and everything, but how accurate is it? And how complete is it as far as when it was when they arrived? Is there any way to? Is that Cody that you're saying can tell us this in 7 p.m.?
Yeah, as I stated, he's available as of 7 p.m. But if you read the memo, again, because this is quote unquote minimal impact from both he and TxDOT's words, not mine, That ITE land use code, this is a table of trip generation based on square footage and usage.
Okay.
This isn't about 290 or Stearns Lane or anything like that. It's about the development itself, just the lot itself.
All right.
And in reality, this is likely far superior to the reality, because again, in your land development code, you can only put 300. It's 300 square feet per parking stall required. And based on the impervious, I mean, we've been working through all these iterations, but we can't even get to 15,000 square feet due to impervious coverage limitation that parking then is being triggered. So we're at about 47 parking spaces. So when you look at 244 trips over the course of a day for 47 parking spaces, you can see that they're not in alignment. That would be far below that trip generation table that's provided. That's the best, unfortunately, it's the best insight I can provide because I'm not a traffic engineer, but through these multiple conversations I've been having with them, that's what I'm picking up.
John, if it would help, we can come back to this item after 7 o'clock.
Okay, because I'm wondering what the unadjusted trips means, and I'm curious why the AM peak and the PM peak on the entrances and exits don't seem to, in my head, don't seem to fit. But okay, I think maybe I am seeing it now, that there would be more entrances in the mornings.
Cody is signing in right now. He's available.
Oh, okay.
That way he can answer your questions directly.
All right, great. Hello, Cody, are you on?
It might take him a second to sign on, so to be honest.
Are we waiting?
Yes,
Mr. Stone?
is
Okay.
Cody dialing in or is he on the computer?
Mr. Levy is muted, I believe.
He's self-muted.
Sorry, Cody, I was muted.
Okay. Hello, everybody. How are you doing?
Hello, Cody.
John, would you mind asking the same question you had just asked?
Sure. Cody, I'm the one asking the question at the moment on the trip generation table. So this, if I'm understanding this right, this is for a 15,000 square foot building in a 24-hour period. And it includes, I'm thinking, the AM peak. There's 24 cars entering. And these would probably be employees or people who work there, right?
That's right. So,
and then in the peak, it would be people that have come to visit or or to carry on business there at the office building. So there would be 12 people during this time, but then there are quite a few people exiting, which would be some of the visitors as well as some of the people who have business there every day, work there or whatever. So if you have 25 people, let's say, exiting at between 4 and 5 p.m. in this peak area, then that's 25 cars that are kind of blocking the residents from getting out of their neighborhood. Is that correct?
Wouldn't they be coming home at that time?
First, let me just explain. So 25 vehicles leaving over the course of an hour is actually very low. And I know it seems high because you think of it, all at one time. But over the course of an hour, probably a resident may only interact with 1 to 2 vehicles max, because their wait time along the frontage road is not going to be that long. When you think of 25 cars exiting, that over the course of an hour, that actually is a very low number.
Okay, I understand. I got you there. Now, what about?
Think about about the trip generation. That's actually based on a number of studies of different types of commercial buildings that could be built. And so it's not an exact science. I mean, it's based on a sample size of different types of commercial facilities or businesses.
So this is just kind of has nothing to do with this particular property. This is just going by the square footage of a building and the number of parking spaces and what would be kind of generally expected for a project of this size. So this is just a generalization. It has nothing to do with the fact that the neighbors have talked of having a backup from Brody all the way past Stearns at this time. Because I've tried to get to Sam's and whatnot from Westgate, and I know that I've been caught up in that traffic jam many times.
Yeah.
So I do understand what they're talking about there. But okay, you've kind of cleared up that this really has nothing to do with that particular project. It's just something that.
Wait, I do want to be clear. I wouldn't say it has nothing to do with the project. I think the clarity is that he's saying he's using a table based on a series of traffic study of similar scale. But as I stated, and Cody, maybe you want to speak to it, that our allowable spaces is not going to yield more than between 45 and 49 parking spaces. So actually that trip generation that you're seeing in the table is far greater than the impact of our site. Is that correct, Cody?
Yeah, so what we use the trip generation manual for is to basically say, because otherwise if we didn't have that manual based on a lot of samples and examples, then we would have to be going by a developer's word. And instead, we just use the building size to say, okay, this is the worst case scenario of, not worst case scenario, but this is the probable amount of vehicles that would be associated to a business this size.
Okay.
Not exact, like I said, but that's what we use just as a justification for estimating those numbers of trips.
Okay, because I guess kind of what I was expecting was somebody standing there with a clicker or something and just telling me how many cars actually come off that ramp and past that building.
Yeah, so
stand there for 24 hours doing it, but there's other ways, I suppose. But
Cody.
to me is more of a something that you could get out of a manual.
Can you let him speak to that? Because he does have data on that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so typically on a traffic impact study, for ones that are larger sizes, then we would do that study of getting the ramp volume and getting the intersection volume and all those things. But because this size is actually very low, 200 vehicles over the course of the day is actually a very low number. It wouldn't necessitate, a traffic impact analysis to that extent where you would get those counts. And another thing that's a challenge here is we looked at available data with counts in the area, but with the pandemic, we can't go out and collect counts regardless.
Right. Yeah, our timing on all this is not helpful.
So the size of it, and we did look at the frontage road volume that we saw over there. The things that really impact traffic are like you said, Rhodey Lane and those intersections. But this traffic that would contribute wouldn't impact it in a negative light because of the low amount of numbers. It wouldn't necessitate a full traffic study.
Are you saying that it would never necessitate a full traffic study?
Typically, TIAs are performed when it's over 1,000 trips per day. This one is a little over 200. And then when it comes to TxDOT and their requirements for turn lanes, they require turn lanes when it's over 50 vehicles. And so that's about 500 vehicles per day is about the number that would associate with a traffic study for TxDOT. And so as you can see, this one is lower at I think, what was it, 230? I don't have it in front of me,
244 is what the table shows, yeah.
That's right.
Cody, I guess I'm understanding that that there's a lot of traffic that comes off that ramp, especially in the afternoon. And I think our own police department has one of those hoses things you run over that counts. Could we just try that as a maybe a better average than this chart? Is that a crazy idea?
Cody, did we've had with TxDOT, because we're obviously leaning on both your analysis and what TxDOT is guiding in this conversation.
So yeah, so basically the thing about the ramp is, and we talked to TxDOT about this, the mitigation measures that are available for a development in this location are very minimal, because you don't want to put up those barricades. You don't want to do those things that might actually cause a safety issue or a crash. Now, the thing about the ramp is it's part of what should be a bigger study, which is freeway studies that I've worked on in the past that are kind of bigger studies overall. Because the access management when that freeway was first built isn't great with how close it is to Stearns Lane. That being said, like I said, because of the amount of vehicles, we did everything we could to mitigate any safety issues that would result from this development. And we think that they do enough to not have further, the one-way traffic does everything it can to minimize any safety impact.
But that one-way traffic starts for many of us in this south area of a trip to Target, way down there past Westgate. They get on that feeder and they want to go to Sam's or the liquor store, and they leave from Target and go through a light or two, and then they're in traffic all the way to Brody. And I've gotten now where I don't do that. I take the
You're referring, I don't mean to cut you off, but he's referring to the one-way traffic of the development, not of 290 access.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. I'm still on the.
Well, Mr. Frick, this is the same conversation that I've told the community that I would be continuing beyond this zoning case, that there's a concern around traffic safety from the exit and 290 access, but all of these things are caused by all the development and existing condition. This one site, as Cody's trying to point out in his memo and from TxDOT's memo, is that it's minimal impact.
Okay. Well, I have something else that's connected with this from one of the letters that I read today from somebody, where they talked with a fire expert was telling them that the Stearns Lane area is a very dangerous one for and has all the possibilities of something like the Bastrop fire, where my own sister lost a house. So where is this other exit I keep hearing about? Because the only one I know of is Stearns onto the feeder. Where is this other exit? Is it people are worried about people?
I was referring to a comment by one of the community members. There's an additional entrance. I don't know the name of the street because I'm not looking at the map, but there is at the other end of the block before you get to Stearns on the access road. Is that not a in and out of the community? Are you referring to a second exit on the property on this development?
No. I'm not worried about your development right now. I'm worried about the people that live there and are so concerned about the development and the safety of the residents if there's a fire right now. How do they get out of there if people are, if there's a danger of a wildfire? Is there a way that the city of Austin?
I don't think that's something that Cody or I could speak to. That sounds like a municipal. What's the course of action when there's wildfire? Between police and fire, do they take action and to evacuate the community? Do they block off parts of the access road? I don't know how that operates. Maybe commissioner staff speak to that, but I feel like a lot to ask of us in one particular. I'm sorry?
You're adding 244 cars into the equation on any given day. Yeah, sure, it's not all at once, but it's still additional cars and that intersection, there's the possibility of people slowing down to turn themselves onto Stern, or somebody slowing down to go into your office building, and then somebody barreling down from the ramp and not having time to properly brake.
And through our study, both TxDOT and Cody can speak to it as needed, but the current curb cut, which would be the curb cut used on the 290 entrance, is further away from the exit ramp than Stearns. So as far as safety in that respect of what you're talking about, somebody barreling down, it doesn't affect the current turn into Stearns. It's beyond it. And that's also additionally why, as Ford did affirm for me, because apparently there's speculation that I'm making these things up, that we're working on a joint use plan for future development of that lot that would then delete the existing access and create a single access, so there's even less opportunity for points of contact by having one driveway for two lots. Again, I'm trying to make as much effort as I can to have a smart development. And I understand there's a lot of subjective concern from the neighbors, but there are measures that can be taken, and that's the point of what Cody has done in his study as well as through TxDOT's review of his study in our multiple conferences to mitigate those concerns.
Okay. So then if you make the deal then with Mr. Forgotten his name now.
Bocock.
He lives on the next lot. Then that would be the entrance into perhaps a neighborhood commercial, like I don't know, convenience store or whatever, or some kind of a small business that you drive to. And then they would turn right and they would go into the office building from the one entrance. Is that?
Yes. And the agreement, and we've talked about this at the last commission. I just want to bring that back so all the commissioners recall that we don't want to impact Ms. Angeli's use of her single family residence or impact her current state of living. So as a result, the intention is that it's triggered by future development, at which point we'd abandon. But for the time being, all of our design proposal has been done nothing but to mitigate any privacy, noise, odor, all these things that were brought up apparently that people think that we haven't been talking about, but we've been presenting and talking about all the while.
Well, and I think that the son agreeing with what you're doing here, if you weren't doing those things, then he would be more concerned about his mother's welfare and would not be approving this, I would think.
Correct.
So I do understand that you were working with the neighbors. And I think that, I don't know, for me, this seems like I wish your property was somewhere else. There would be no.
It's a pre-existing condition situation. At a certain point, you know, we do the best we can.
And I don't know if there's people are claiming that you're not doing your job by figuring all this out, but it's a tough job for all of us, including this zoning commission. So I'll get off.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cody, thank you too.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
Cody,
it.
stay on for me in case somebody has another.
Does anybody else have any questions for Cody while he's on the phone? Miguel, what you've heard with it being a non-site specific engineering approval of the traffic study, is that satisfactory to you?
It's not a site-specific count. It's a site-specific study in that he's looking at the type of development, the size of the development. They're not adjusting down for the parking lots, the differential in parking. And again, at the end of the day, I am not a traffic engineer. We made them get a traffic engineer. We made them get a sealed, signed and sealed opinion. And if, I'm not going to second guess that. Now, if somebody had brought forward an opposing expert to say that this is not, that the study was flawed, or that the study was not done with current standards, or something was wrong with it, that'd be something else. But we have no evidence on the other side to suggest that we should just disregard the study. It's the only thing we have in front of us. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I'm not in a position to question it. I was in a position to demand it and require it, and Mr. Levy went and got it. And then when I looked at it and wasn't sealed and didn't say that this was going to be all right, I sent it back. Remember, I've been pushing for this traffic study to be done, and it's been done. But at some point, there's not much we can do. there are pre-existing conditions that I understand the frustration of the residents, but they can also take out their frustration on the Economic and Development Committee. Every Christmas we put up billboards, we buy radio ads, we say come to Sunset Valley, and you know what, it works. People do. They come to Sunset Valley, and adds to the traffic right there trying to get to our shopping centers. And but you're not going to eliminate what's already there. We have the same issue here in the old part of Sunset Valley with Burger Stadium when we used to have football games. Maybe we will again someday. Graduations, other events where everybody.
Solution to the exit ramp, because I feel like that we're overlooking a very simple solution to this exit ramp. You just need to.
I'm sorry. The comments are closed to the public. They're open to the commissioners.
So to come back to your original question, yes, it's still concerning, Bob, but we don't have anything on the, we don't have anything to suggest that it's not, we have a professional engineer that has signed off and sealed his opinion.
Right. Okay, so.
Which is beyond what the code actually, we can ask for it, but it's not required off the bat. And we asked for it.
We send this on to the council and the council approves the zoning. There's still specific site plan to be done, and and at that time I would think a more specific traffic study to this site that somebody would have to review for the site plan. Is that not true?
Yes. If you take a look at Appendix A and Appendix B of the Land Development Code, ingress and egress and all the specific facilities and proposed and required for the safe circulation, all that is in Appendix B, not in Appendix A. Appendix A is required for zoning, and then a site plan is Appendix B. And we don't have this. We don't have a site plan. We got a zoning thing in front of us, which is a conceptual site plan, not a site plan. Those are two different things.
Right. It's kind of a conceptual site plan and a conceptual traffic study.
Right, and then you move into the specific site plan. Right.
Does anybody on the commission have any other question addressing specifically the change from single family to neighborhood office for this property? I'll take that silence as a no. At this point, I'd entertain a motion if anybody has one.
I'll move to approve. This is Bob Reitz.
All right, thank you, Bob. Do I have a second?
Please state what you're want us to vote on.
The recommendation of the city council is to change the zoning classification from single family residential to neighborhood office as we are in the agenda.
Yes. Item 4 in the agenda.
I'll second. This is Miguel.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Anybody have anything else to say?
Well, it seems that Miguel has narrowed this down to where I can't do anything but vote for it. So I am hoping that in all of this future iteration of the site plans and all the council and everything else, that all of these things will be will become clearer. And I would love it if Mr. Levy could not have any more walls thrown up in front of it. If we could somehow get all these things answered to the satisfaction of the residents and Mr. Levy. So that's, I guess I'll leave it there.
So
All
Chairman
right,
Stevens.
any further discussion? All right, Sylvia, you want to call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Skewis,
Aye.
Mr. Boozer,
Aye.
Mr. Frick,
Aye.
Mr. Reitz,
Aye.
Mr. Huerta.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, we'll move on to item 5, which is deliberation of action to recommend to the council for 4812 from single family to neighborhood commercial. The agenda item that just came up on the screen, once again, I can't get to the bottom of it, but I guess there is a recommendation to staff for this one to be approved.
There's a recommendation for approval to neighborhood commercial in line with the future land use map. There has been some question, it was raised earlier as to whether the 10 points were submitted. It's embedded in the documents that are all available online. It's on the screen now, dated March 18th. These are the documents Mr. Cowan has alluded to. It references 4800 and 4812. There was also a question as to a site plan. A site plan was not submitted as part of, a conceptual site plan was not submitted as part of 4812. As Mr. Lowcock expressed, that his mother will continue to live there and there is no intent for any construction or building permit at this time.
And unfortunately, that creates quite a conundrum for us. You know, the way I got to yes on the first one was strict adherence to our ordinances. And, you know, if council is on the phone, you know, she'll back me up that the Supreme Court since 1953, the Texas Supreme Court since 1953 says that ordinances are red light statutes. And, you know, you basically follow them and in the same way you'd follow a statute. So shall means mandatory and may is permissive. And one of the things on our ordinance is that a conceptual site plan shall be filed. And I'm a little upset, a little shocked that staff is recommending approval when one of the things that is required is not here. And, you know, when earlier we were looking at these things, I kind of assumed that staff took the first cut. But Sylvia, one of your emails earlier, I noticed you were confusing a conceptual site plan and a site plan. So I went back and took a look, and that's when I discovered this little bombshell. So one, Sylvia, you know, I'm hoping that was a mistake on your part and not prestidigitation and trying to obfuscate the issue. So and I'm going to take it as just a simple mistake. But there is a difference between the two, and there's a difference between shall and may. And here we have a shall for the conceptual plan. You just said they hadn't filed one. I don't think we can go forward. Counsel, legal counsel, what's your take?
Hi, this is Roxana Stevens. So I have looked at this issue, and there appears to be an inconsistency in the land development code currently, because even though, and I'm looking at section 2.305, which is in the land development code, which speaks to amendments. We have section C that lists the application requirements, and you're correct. It says number 5, a conceptual site plan, and it references C Appendix A. But when you come to number 6, regarding the statement that explains, you have in 6B how the conceptual plan, if being processed concurrently, meets the goals, standards, and policies of the comprehensive land use plan. So that implies that the conceptual plan could not be considered at this point. So there's a little
Right.
bit of inconsistency there.
It could be considered earlier.
Yes.
And
it could be
and
considered
and that's
earlier.
where 300 comes in.
Yes. So, but that is not clear from the ordinance. I'm just pointing that out. So that probably needs to be clarified and corrected. And so when it comes to the council, the zoning commission, you're correct. We have these application requirements, and administratively, it was determined, and that's an administrative determination, that it moved forward to the zoning commission. Then it's up to the zoning commission to consider these things and make their decision based on what it says, what the land development code says, and what the commission believes it to mean.
And so and Mr. Worthley, you're right. Conceptual site plan and site plan are two different things. Mr. Lowcock, being the representative for Miss Angeli, they do not have any plans for development on the property at this point. So there is not even a conceptual site plan they could propose.
That produces the question, why do they need the change now?
Because I won't speak to Mr. Lowcock, but administratively, they're allowed to request. I would not have been able to deny an application for zoning because I would have been in other sorts of trouble. And it's consistent with our future land use map.
Well, I understand that, but we have a technical issue here, and that is a conceptual plan required? And I'm not sure I'm hearing an answer. Miguel indicates that it is necessary, and if it's necessary, it should be presented. If it's not necessary, I'll ask the question, does he need it now, or can he defer it and reapply when we are satisfied that there's a conceptual insert with the application that is acceptable to us? He may not, certainly not, he doesn't appear to be ready to make that conceptual.
Yeah, Mr. Lowcox is on the phone. He can more adequately answer that question.
Yes, hello. Mother is 89, so I do not wish to sound like I want her to be gone, but I do know she will pass away. And yes, our future uses of the land will come from the family, and nobody wishes to reside in the house that is currently, as I stated earlier, a minimum of 70 years old. I visit Mother multiple times during the year, and I may be coming in on July 12th. Depending on the numbers, I've already postponed the trip just because of her age and of the current circumstances. So I'm trying to be cognitive of that. But none of the family wish to remain as a residential once she passes away and move to something other than residential, because it's going to have to be completely torn down. The beautiful oak tree that is there, I do not wish to harm in any way. That is one of my loves of the property. Going back to an earlier statement, the 4800 property hasn't been beautiful in a long time since those trees were cut down, and it's been 3 to 4 feet of weeds. I also have called the police to chase away transients from the back portion of the property coming onto Mother's property, presenting other problems. So our intent is to develop as soon as possible, but not before Mother passes away, because it is her home, it is her decision. So can it be deferred? Yes, but I'd prefer to make the change now because of Mr. Levy's, as I stated earlier, his concern for Mother and for the development. And there's been many proposals through the years that have been negative, not caring for Mother at all. It's only a positive route, taking away the weeds, taking away the transients and other implications that those things present to themselves. So yes, we are for the change now, whether it impacts 4812 at this time or not, but because I don't know what's going to come in the future and who's going to try to develop this property in the future and how are they going to negatively impact our property. And that's my concerns, is for Mother, for the future, also for family, because family is going to keep this property, not just me, but her grandchildren. Her youngest son died a year ago in June. She lost everything because he was living with her. He was taking care of her. Now I am currently the custodian of her circumstances. And that's what I have in mind for her and for his children, not for anything else. But I see positive things from Mr. Levy, and that's why I am on board with these zoning changes.
All right, thank you.
This is Roxana Stevens, council. Can I speak real quick?
Yes, please.
I heard, and I apologize, I heard that your question wasn't answered on to whether the conceptual site plan is required. I agreed with Miguel, and I agree that that's exactly what the ordinance says in plain language, that as an application requirements for an amendment, the application should be accompanied by number 5, a conceptual site plan pursuant to Appendix A. And when I was talking about that, I did point out a little bit of inconsistency that just needs to be clarified, but it is understood what that means. So I do believe that a conceptual site plan needs to be submitted with the application. Even though there is no development, the possibility would be for a reapplication with, say, this driveway development that you were talking about. That would have to restart the process again with the new application if that were to be done. I know that we've already had the public hearing, and it could be possible that if the zoning commission asked for the conceptual plan, that could possibly be submitted here, but that is new information that would also require another possibly public hearing because it was a requirement of the amendment and needed to be considered. So that's where I'm at. And if there's any other questions, and I hope I answered questions, if there's anything else that needs clarity, please let me know.
Yes, I'd like to know if he submitted a conceptual plan, how binding is it? You seem to allude to the fact that if he does a conceptual plan, if it's significantly modified, he has to reapply. Is that correct?
Well, no. In the conceptual plan, because it's conceptual, it's not completely binding on the developer, on Mr. Levy. But in this particular case, and I haven't seen any conceptual plan that was submitted with this, I'm going off the information that I'm hearing tonight that a conceptual plan was not included in this particular application for this piece of property. So rather than, even though that's not an amendment, and I know that he's explained, and I believe in the last presentation in the public hearing, it was shown that Miss Angeli's house is still going to be there, and that's basically what the concept is when they were still seeking the rezoning just for future development after Miss Angeli is no longer occupying the property. If he wanted to reapply with that conceptual plan, we would have to start the process all over.
So Roxy, if I'm understanding you correctly, the conceptual site plan could essentially be the drawing of where Miss Angeli's house is right now and the potential shared access with Mr. Levy.
Yes, and that's basically why it's a conceptual site plan is different from a site plan, because it's conceptual in nature. And the way that our land development code is written is that it is not binding, and that's pursuant to Appendix A, that the conceptual layout is any proposed structures, parking facilities, egress, ingress routes, landscaping, water control. I'm reading straight from the Appendix A, but it says the applicant will not be bound to the location of the proposed improvements shown on the conceptual plan, but their general location is required just for planning and evaluation purposes. So, and what I'm hearing is that, and what I've saw in the presentation, what I'm hearing today is that in seeking the rezoning change, the conceptual plan is Miss Angeli's home, but with a potential, with the that shared driveway that Mr. Levy and Mr. Lowcock, who is the authorized legal representative for Miss Angeli's property, have been discussing.
Miguel, do you have thoughts on that?
Roxana I was following Appendix A, and that's the only thing that I'd point out is the general location of the improvement has to be shown, but that's it. So as long as they don't plan on moving something from where Miss Angeli's house is to the front of the property or something like that, but they can easily draw the roadway, for example, and then say this is generally where we're going to put something. That's just, I'm not talking to the merits of this. I'm addressing the legality of our actions. And I think many folks, I've been on this commission. If there was a child born at my first zoning commission, that child would be voting now. That child would be drinking now. I've been here for over 21 years. And I've always been a by the book kind of guy. And this doesn't pass the by the book test. And we can't take away hurdles from people. We can't add hurdles to people. What's in the code is in the code, and that's why there was a difference. 4812, they seem to have met all the hurdles. I'm not talking about the merits. I'm just saying they met those requirements. It's up to council to figure out whether that's an up or down. But on 48, they hit the hurdle, and it should have been identified earlier in the process. And until Sylvia's email, I didn't, I thought they had already looked at that.
Well,
I'd like to ask,
I'm relying on you. Go ahead.
Aaron, in all these talks, my degree's in architecture, and I've worked with many architects, and in fact, I have great admiration for the architect you're working with. But even when I was in architecture school or working on these different projects, a conceptual plan, if you're working with him, as he said, and you have also said, haven't you done, maybe it hasn't come to the level of a conceptual plan, but at least a study of how his property and the adjacent property could be working together. And you could put a little more to that, and there would be your conceptual plan that we're asking for.
If I may, again, I understand all the points being raised, and I agree if, commission has to go by the book. and providing a conceptual plan would not be an issue. And if that is something that's being requested or required, I would request, just like at the last commission that we tabled the item to be able to provide what was needed by next commission, I would request that we do so in this case. Just for clarity, if I were able to share a screen, I can show you that there has been a very rough conceptual work done. I want to be clear that the conceptual work that I've done on 4800, because that's the property that is being developed, to go to that extent, it has cost thousands of dollars. So I want to provide what commission is requesting, but I just want to be clear that the depth of how far that concept would go would be sufficient just to demonstrate the like you're pointing out, the access, building location, all the things that would be part of site. And as you're aware, because of impervious coverage, very much like what our concept is, it's limited. It's going to wind up being a building with parking underneath, close to frontage, because it can only capture 18% of coverage, of impervious coverage, and the lot size is nearly identical. So because of that, I was able to do some initial conceptual, and I have shared this with the neighbors. Those neighbors who haven't seen it may just have not been clued into all these conversations, but it has been shared. And I'm happy to pull it up right now if you're just curious enough to see. I understand that it wasn't provided prior to this meeting for you to review. So if that being the case, we can take this a step further if we could table this one, just like the traffic memo, just the one checkbox of the items on your item of 10. Any thoughts there?
It's fine with me.
Mr. Levy, I appreciate that offer. And I see that's where this is going anyway. So if we could table this and provide it for, you provide that for the next meeting, we can go ahead with it, I'm sure. Is there, I would entertain a motion to table the item then.
So moved.
That was Robert?
Yes.
Second,
Okay. Second by who?
John.
John, thank you. Sylvia, you want to call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Skewis,
Aye.
Mr. Huerta,
Aye.
Mr. Boozer,
Aye.
Mr. Frick,
Aye.
Mr. Reeds.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. I believe that's the end of the agenda items we have for this evening. And item 6 would be a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second, John.
All right. Thank you, John. Sylvia?
Mr. Skewis,
Aye.
Mr. Huerta,
Aye.
Mr. Boozer,
Aye.
Mr. Frick,
Aye.
Mr. Reeds.
Aye.
Motion passes. Meeting is adjourned at 7:43.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.